Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's regularly scheduled City Council meeting. The meeting is called to order. We kindly ask our recording secretary, Jean Fernari, to please take the roll call.
Mike Bruno?
Here.
Jared Burkhart? Here. Donald Cummings? Here. Becky Ruby? Here. Dean Kilberg?
Here.
Craig Maladra?
Here.
Richard Marks?
Here.
Jean McGowan? Here. Jim Radecki?
Here.
Robert Swanson?
Here.
I'd like to invite Michael Lambert to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Item 3A, ladies and gentlemen, is to consider the mayor's appointments to the various city boards and commissions. A copy of that information is available to you in your packet, and it will be, of course, posted on the website, and you may very well have a hard copy before you. I don't know for sure. Only I do for the cheat sheet. Is there such a motion? So moved. Motion by Alderman Marks, seconded by Alderman Bruno. Any questions or comments? A roll call vote would be in order. Jean?
Mike Bruno?
Aye.
Tara Burkhart? Aye. Donald Cummings? Aye. Becky Ruby? Aye. Dean Kilberg?
Aye.
Craig Maladra?
Aye.
Richard Marks?
Aye.
Jean McGowan? Aye. Jim Radecki?
Nay.
Robert Swanson?
Aye.
Item 3B, ladies and gentlemen, is a Historic Preservation Monthly Presentation by our good friend, Mr. Michael Lambert, on the Tax Assessment Freeze Program.
Good evening.
Good evening, Michael. Michael, for the benefit of all those tuning in and those our new friends in the audience, could you introduce yourself, your
Yes.
role?
I'm Michael Lambert. I'm the Preservation Planner for the City of Geneva. I've been here since 2013, and so I'm into my fourth year here with the City of Geneva and the Historic District work. So May is National Preservation Month, and the preservation theme across America is This Place Matters. Across the country, communities are celebrating the preservation of historic places. This month, I was the guest speaker at the Geneva History Museum, where I presented a lecture entitled Kate Raftery's River Lane Beautification Project from Slum to Vista of Beauty, which detailed the transformation of South River Lane beginning in the 1920s. This past Saturday, I was one of two volunteer tour guides for the inaugural suburban walking tour and pub crawl sponsored by the Skyline Council of Landmarks, Illinois, which is a statewide advocacy organization for preservation. That program was presented in conjunction with the preservation partners of the Fox Valley, and we had nearly 50 participants from Chicago and the suburbs who spent nearly 5 hours marveling at the architecture of Geneva while they were enjoying libations in historic buildings. Tonight, in our continuing celebration of National Preservation Month, I've been asked to explain one of our successful preservation efforts in the Geneva Historic District. The Property Tax Assessment Freeze Program encourages homeowners to rehabilitate historic properties and in turn receive a financial incentive. The program is made possible through legislative partnerships. The Property Tax Assessment Freeze Program encourages homeowners to rehabilitate historic properties and in turn receive a financial incentive. In short, if homeowners are willing to invest at least 25% of the fair market value of their historic home towards rehabilitation work that meets specific standards, then the homeowners are rewarded by having their property tax assessment frozen at the pre-renovation assessed value for a set period of time. The program is made possible through a variety of legislative partnerships. Preservation relies on partnerships at many levels. The Property Tax Assessment Freeze Program, which benefits those owner-occupied residential properties that are designated as historically significant, is made possible through partnerships at the local, state, and federal levels of government. The Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, a federal agency within the National Park Service, establishes the general procedures for historic preservation activities nationwide, including the requirements for designation of local municipalities as certified local governments. The property tax assessment freeze may only be accessed for properties lying within certified local government communities. In Illinois, the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO for short, is the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency, or IHPA, which oversees the property tax assessment freeze program throughout the entire state. The Preservation Services Division of IHPA reviews all projects requesting a tax assessment freeze. Locally, the Geneva Historic Preservation Commission was established 35 years ago. Since 1982, the local commission is responsible for identifying historically significant properties throughout Geneva. Additionally, as part of its public education and outreach efforts, the local commission and its staff are largely responsible for promoting the benefits of the property tax assessment freeze program, working closely with interested homeowners, realtors, developers, and prospective purchasers. Preservation through partnership is the goal of the Certified Local Government Program. Local, state, and federal governments work together to help locally committed communities save their irreplaceable historic character. The CLG program is jointly administered by the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Offices. Every certified community works through a certification process to become recognized as a certified local government. Once certified, CLGs become an active partner in the Federal Historic Preservation Program and are subject to annual review of their certification. Both county and municipal governments may become certified. Less than 4% of Illinois counties are designated as certified local governments, with Kane County being one of those 4. Less than 6% of Illinois municipalities have achieved designation as a certified local government. Geneva is among a select group of Illinois communities that are certified and thus able to offer this incentive to its homeowners. Once certified, the local units of government agree to follow required federal and state requirements and then become eligible to receive grant funding, technical assistance with direct access to SHPO staff, and participate in incentive programs for the preservation of locally significant historic properties. Geneva has been the recipient of several historic preservation grants since 1980 and actively promotes the benefits of the property tax assessment freeze program to eligible homeowners and developers. The certification process has several requirements. A certified local government must meet the following minimum goals. Each CLG community must establish a qualified historic preservation commission of at least 5 members with a demonstrated interest in and experience with historic preservation. A CLG community must enforce appropriate state or local legislation for the designation and protection of historic properties through the adoption of a local ordinance. A CLG community must maintain a system for the survey and inventory of local historic resources. Currently, Geneva is in the process of updating its local survey, which at the request of the SHPO will include an inventory of accessory structures and landscape features. Annually, a CLG must participate in at least one educational or informational meeting as approved by the SHPO. A CLG community must facilitate public participation in local preservation activities through education and outreach. Renovation projects for historic properties often require staff and commissioners to provide one-on-one education of and consultation with homeowners, architects, and developers. Additionally, CLG communities, through their commissions, provide review of and comment on nominations for properties to the National Register of Historic Places that lie within the corporate boundaries. Each CLG community is required to submit an annual report that demonstrates substantial compliance with all CLG requirements and demonstrates support of local preservation through the attendance and action of its commissioners. Most programs to assist private homeowners in the rehabilitation of historic properties, especially those that are in need of significant work, have evaporated since 2008. One program that survives is the Property Tax Assessment Freeze Program. Owners of historically designated owner-occupied residence within a CLG community, such as Geneva, are entitled to participate in that program. Application for the freeze may be made at any time within 2 years of the completion of a qualified rehabilitation project at a designated property. However, it is advisable to initiate the certification project as early as possible, preferably before any renovation work begins. The freeze is based on the pre-rehabilitation assessed valuation of the buildings situated on any designated property. The assessed value, therefore, remains unchanged for a period of 8 years. The assessed value of the land, however, is not frozen. After the expiration of 8 years, the tax assessment is adjusted over the next 4 years to the current fully assessed valuation for the rehabilitated property. Eligible properties may be either locally or nationally designated sites that are subject to review under the local preservation ordinance. Properties may be individual landmarks and significant or contributing properties within a designated historic district. Eligible properties must be owner-occupied residences, but not necessarily single-family properties. The property tax assessment freeze is not transferable to another property owner. However, the freeze benefit may be transferred prior to the completion of rehabilitation under certain circumstances. To qualify for the freeze, 25% of the market value of the property's buildings must be allocated for qualified rehabilitation expenses, which may include items such as restoration of historic floor plans, window restoration, tuck pointing and/or siding repair, updating of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, repair of interior finishes, and the reconstruction of historic architectural features. The Geneva HPC and IHPA work closely to provide consistent direction and guidance to interested applicants through the review process. Both bodies review proposed work based on the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic properties. Although the review authority of the local commission is limited to those exterior architectural features visible from the public right-of-way, the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency's authority extends to the interior, including primary spaces and significant features that must be preserved under the provisions of the program. The initial application requires making contact with the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency, and at that time, the assessed valuation of the property based on fair market value is determined. The second part of the process consists of submitting proposed rehabilitation plans and photographs of the property prior to any work being initiated. Based on IHPA's review, work proceeds. However, the owner should notify IHPA before any changes to the project are implemented to assure that the assessment freeze is not jeopardized in the process. Once the project is completed, documentation is forwarded to IHPA proving that at least 25% of the property's market value has been spent on the rehabilitation. Additionally, photographs must be submitted to IHPA. Typically, a representative of the agency will make a final inspection to see the completed project firsthand. Within 45 days of the final submittals, IHPA will determine if the project fully complies with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And at that time, if approved, IHPA forwards a letter to both the local tax assessor's office and the owner, and the assessor is directed to make the necessary adjustments to implement the freeze. Certain conditions may result in the tax assessment freeze being revoked for a property, including the sale of the property, a change of use for the property, or if alterations that do not meet the standards are completed at a later date. Annually, homeowners are required to submit an affidavit providing or proving ownership and compliance for the tax assessment freeze to remain in effect. According to the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency, Geneva is one of the most active communities in Illinois utilizing the property tax assessment freeze. Since 2013, 4 projects have been successfully completed, and several others were completed successfully prior to that time. At the present time, in 2017, a 5th project is currently underway, and 4 additional projects are currently under review by the Geneva HPC and the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency. In closing, I would like to highlight a few of the projects, all of varying size and complexities, that have been successfully completed here in Geneva. 402 Franklin Street was a substantial renovation that included a significant addition to the right side and the rear of the home, but fully complied with the standards. 213 South Fifth Street included a rear addition that nearly doubled the footprint of the original home, and also the project included the renovation to the historic garage. Some approved work is virtually imperceptible, such as the work completed at 211 North 3rd Street. There is a non-qualifying addition to the rear, but the restoration included the restoration of the original interior floor plan, as well as upgrades to the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical systems that amounted to the 25% required expenditure. Other projects, such as the restoration of the impressive Henry Fargo residence, are major undertakings. And occasionally, some projects are virtually completed before application is made and when the homeowners realize the tax freeze would be a beneficial opportunity. In this case, at 810 Dow Avenue, the work was completed according to the standards, but the house had not been landmarked and was only landmarked after the fact, but within the 2-year period of qualification for the program. So the program is somewhat complex. It has a lot of different moving parts to it. But again, we have used it very successfully here on many different types of projects, and I thank you for your attention and would be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, sir. Any comments or questions for Mr. Lambert from the dais? Alderman Bruno?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. A couple things came to mind. The investment of 25% of market value, that is actually, is that not the EAV on your tax bill is what they go off of, or, because I don't remember an actual market assessment on properties.
They use several different bases for that. One is the EAV, but if that seems to be out of line, they will ask for comparables in the area and some other things. I don't get into that side of it very often, but they can ask for other documentation.
So the, I know, full disclosure, I benefited from such a tax freeze. In fact, the whole neighborhood, if I stand on my porch, not only is my house a success story, but I think I can see 5 others, and it's really transformed the neighborhood. And I think the awesome value of this program is, derelict properties, if you will, can be resurrected and greatly impact the community in terms of bringing up property values all over. I am past my 8 years. I am paying all the property taxes that we all don't like doing. But it's really a tremendous program, and you'd be surprised how easily you can meet that 25% bogey if you want to do a serious project, and a lot of people have benefited from that. The other thing too, with you talked about the state of Illinois gets into interior features and integrity. Can you say something? There are certain things like kitchens and bathrooms that are presumed to be replaced time and again, are they not?
Correct. Typically, the interior space they look at are what they call the public or the readily accessible formal spaces of the home. So typically foyers, stair halls, libraries, front parlors, dining rooms. Kitchens, bathrooms, bedrooms are typically off limits, but not always.
So you can renovate your bathroom, you can renovate
Correct.
your kitchen typically, unless it was, I suppose, an historic kitchen.
Correct.
But, well, I appreciate the presentation. I just want to make people understand that this really can be a great benefit to them and the community. Thank you.
Alderman Radecki?
Well, my first comment is I'm glad I'm no longer supplementing Alderman Bruno's tax bill, so that's good. Is there a couple of questions, and to Alderman Bruno's point about the interior renovation, we did have somebody who put a substantial amount of money into a renovation who did not qualify for the freeze because of an interior alteration that they made. We had a person that did not qualify, so you have to be careful with that.
Correct.
A couple quick questions. We're a certified local government. Do we pay any kind of a fee to be a member of that? I know you have to go through a lot of application process, but is there an annual fee to be a member of that association?
There is no annual fee.
Who's the SHPO again? Can you tell me what that stands for?
State Historic Preservation Office, and it also, just to confuse you, also stands for State Historic Preservation Officer. So you have to know if you're talking about the agency or the person.
Okay. Because one interesting thing I caught, that you said that their review, and I know that this gives some people heartburn, their review is being expanded to outbuildings and building and landscape elements. Can you elaborate upon that? Because I know people have pushed back and said, hey, look, you can look at my house, but don't look at the color, don't look at the interior of my house, don't look at my outbuildings. My landscape is my own business. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure. What has happened, more recent surveys have been done in other communities, typically encompass the entire property. Our 1999 survey only looked at the primary structure, so typically the residences or the main commercial building. And what has been discovered over time is that oftentimes the accessory buildings have some kind of tie to the history of the home or the business. And so the state really wants to have a full architectural inventory of all the built structures within a district. So it's not necessarily that every one of them is going to be saved, but they want to have a baseline. So if a particular question comes up, we have a good view of all of the buildings in the district.
Does our commission look at landscape and accessory buildings, or do they just take the application on the face for what's being applied for?
We don't look at softscape. We don't look at bushes, shrubs, flowers, that sort of thing. But if there's paving or garden structures or historic walls, things like that, those are part of our review and have been part of the review for many years.
Thank you.
Before I recognize Alderman Bruno for a second time, anyone else wish to ask Mr. Lambert anything? Alderman McGowan?
Oh, hi, Michael. I just want to say thank you for your presentation, and it's really amazing what the Historic Preservation Commission, if I'm saying that correctly, does for the city of Geneva. And so many people come to our town and enjoy the historic buildings that we have, and some of them are, I think, featured on the Christmas house tour that we have every year. And it's so cool just to have this as part of our town. It does really make us special and sets us apart and brings people here. I really like the catchphrase that was in your presentation, approved by the SHPO. Maybe that could be on a t-shirt or something. I thought that was pretty cute. So anyway, I just want to say thank you very much for the information. It's awesome.
You're welcome.
Alderman Bruno?
To Mr. Radecki, at this point, the assessed value is high enough that I'm sure I'm subsidizing many other taxpayers now.
Anyone else from the dais? Anyone from the audience for Mr. Lambert? Well done, sir. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Good to see you. Item 4 this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is entitled Public Comment, or Comments, forgive me. This is an opportunity for anyone joining us this evening here in the council chamber to present any information, ask any questions, have any curiosities answered and or responded to by this council and or professional staff. So at that time, I'd like to turn over the floor to anyone wishing to speak or ask the council a question. All I ask is that when you do join us at the podium, please share with us your name, and if you could be so kind, your address as well. If your name is complicated, we ask you to please spell your last name so that we can record it for the minutes. This is not a public hearing per se. This is simply an opportunity to share with us your comments. Yes.
Hi, my name is Amy Ahern, and I spoke with you guys last week pertaining the Prairie Winds Complex. I just wanted to clarify a couple more things from last week as well. I understand that these apartments are going in whether I want them there or not. I understand that the intergovernmental agreement states that there will be two cutouts, the north side of Britcher. I'm not here to argue any of that. I'm here because of the safety and traffic concerns this will cause. This area has abundance of traffic. Dating back to 2008, when former Alderman Singer expressed future concerns about this area after they decided a light should be installed at Britcher and Geneva Commons. As the plans are right now, there is only going to be an entryway on Britcher, 2 entryways on Britcher. In the St. Charles' own transportation plan, it states the design of the street systems that will affect how people get around Short blocks, connectivity, and a grid system are recommended to provide multiple choices for bicycles, pedestrians, and automobiles. This project doesn't follow St. Charles' own recommendation of how a street system should be built. The city of St. Charles and Geneva need to work together to solve this problem before it gets worse. The traffic needs to be diverted off Britcher to a major street like Route 38. Fisher Drive is likely to feel the traffic bulge when there is congestion at Britcher and Geneva Commons, followed by Williamsburg and Kessinger Road. This complex will be felt by many neighborhoods in Geneva. At the St. Charles Planning meeting, Jeffrey Ratzer represented Prairie Winds Complex. He stated he didn't want to encourage people from coming through the shopping center to avoid a traffic light. So the company that is putting the complex in already is talking about that there's already a traffic problem, and they're going to add to it. He also says because there will be 2- and 3-bedroom apartments, he didn't want traffic through his streets because he wants his families to feel safe. I want that too. I want my family to feel safe. I want to be able to say, yeah, kids, you can go up to Geneva Commons. But that's not going to likely happen in a few years. Why should we already, as residents, feel the effects of the traffic and not St. Charles, when there isn't an exit in St. Charles at all? Before allowing this project to be built, I asked the members of the council to ask St. Charles to open discussion about how to deal with the increase in traffic and safety concerns. I also asked each and every one of the councilmen to be educated in the issue before deciding this should be a go. There are many more issues on the horizon with decisions St. Charles will make that will affect the residents of Geneva. I fear by not questioning many aspects of this project, we are opening the floodgates for future issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's why we're here, same topic.
Fantastic. We were visiting earlier, so. Anyone else? Yes, sir. And then the young lady. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Michael Zupke. I live in 3184 Fieldstone Drive, and I'm also here to address my concerns about the impending traffic impact of Prairie Wind subdivision. Currently, what I can see on the mechanicals that they have posted on the website is they're going to ask for a curb cut opposite Camden Road, which would be their major entrance to the subdivision. And then there's another one that's just a little bit to the east of Fisher. And that one doesn't show clearly whether or not it's going to be right turn only or a full exchange for entrance and egress out of the subdivision. But I also want to bring up the point of impending traffic concerns then at the corner of Brisher and Peck. Right now, with the soccer fields and the surge in attendance to the soccer practices that they have there, in spring and fall, there's quite a bit of gridlock at certain times of day. And you don't have anything but a one-way, a stop sign there going from Brisher to Peck. And so if you have additional traffic coming out of a subdivision going west on Brisher, that could lead to even more gridlock at that intersection as well. So I would just ask to see if the city council could compel the developer of St. Charles to look at some future traffic control, such as a stoplight at Brisher and Peck, if that's possible, or what they're planning on doing for traffic control at Camden and Brisher. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zupke. Let's see if you can match Mr. Zupke's booming voice.
I'll try.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mary Petranek. I live at 3310 Fieldstone Drive. I did address the council last week. I sent a letter to my 2 aldermen and to Mayor Burns, and I would like to just paraphrase what I said in that letter for the benefit of all of you. It's my understanding that the above-mentioned development, Prairie Winds, while located entirely within the city limits of St. Charles, will have its only entrances and exits on the south side of the complex, feeding directly onto an already highly traveled and busy Britcher Road, which is owned by the city of Geneva. If my information is correct, it would seem that the residents of Geneva, and in particular, those of us residing in Fisher Farms, are owed an explanation from our elected officials as to the reasoning and rationale behind this decision. At last Monday night's meeting, Mayor Burns was asked if the developer had considered putting the entrances and exits on the north side off of Route 38. His answer was that in doing so, it was not a feasible solution and there would be too much underdeveloped land surrounding the entrances and exits and would therefore be potentially difficult to develop at a later time. The solution then, to burden the neighboring town and its residents, it sounds like a much more palatable solution. Money is, of course, we know, the driving force behind any type of real estate development, be it commercial, mixed use, or residential. So I have to believe that the developer's main concern in moving the entrance and exit points is a cost-saving measure for him. Great for them, but what does it benefit us? What do the Geneva residents benefit by this situation? Fisher Drive, the main thoroughfare through our subdivision, is currently used as a shortcut for those folks not wishing to wait at the light at the Lowe's or Geneva Commons intersections or at Randall Road. On any given day, at any given hour, traffic can be seen coming east on Britcher, turning right onto Fisher Drive, and heading south to Caneville Road at the end of our development. The opposite route, traveling from south to north, is also commonplace. These are not Fisher Farms residents driving down this street. These are residents from other developments and communities using our subdivision as their personal shortcut. The Prairie Winds complex, with its mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, will add hundreds of vehicles to our city streets and will create even more of a hazard for our children and families. The traffic study that was completed and discussed at last Monday's meeting was, in my opinion, poorly executed. A traffic study at an intersection of a small, still developing enclave of homes is a far cry from a traffic study conducted at a clogged intersection such as the one at Lowe's in Geneva Commons. The intersection at Randall Road and Britcher would also give a much better overall picture of the congestion in this area. Were either or both of these crowded intersections considered when the traffic study was conducted? And if not, why not? The project is far too large in scope to move forward without much more consideration and study from both the developer and our elected officials. To think that this development, as proposed, is appropriate and necessary for successful completion is beyond the pale. I would ask each of you to carefully consider your constituents, speak with your colleagues, and insist that this project, as described, is not in the best interest of the residents you serve and whose leadership we rely on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Mrs. Husky, correct?
Hi, I'm Kelly Husky at 622 Shepherd Lane in Fisher Farms. I've been in there for 12 years as a Geneva resident. Before our Geneva elected aldermen vote tonight, I would like to make sure that you understand the vote at hand. During the committee, the whole meeting last week on May 5th, I witnessed many unanswered questions by our aldermen. I don't know if these questions were answered. I'd like Mayor Burns to ask each individual councilman if he or she has read the traffic study. And do they understand what they're voting on tonight? There was a lot of confusion last week. Do we have right? Do we not have right? I walked away feeling very confused on what you were voting on at the time. On April 17th, St. Charles Council meeting, and I quote, Mark Conan, the city administrator, said, when Geneva Commons annexed first, they, City of Geneva, annexed Britcher Road as we know it today, immediately west of Randall Road. It gives them the legal authority regarding access, speed limit, enforcement, maintenance, etc. When we are planning against Britcher Road on the north side where Britcher Commons or Prairie Winds is located, the City of Geneva signs off on the final plat. There were lengthy discussions about traffic when this project was proposed, before it was proposed, and as it was still proposed. There was pages and pages of transcripts talking about the traffic problem. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I read through them. The emergency exit that was due to come out between Meyer and Lowe's was nixed because the developer thought that, one, he did not want people driving through his neighborhood, so we're going to get them in Fisher Farms down Fisher Road, and it was a cost-saving measure. He didn't want to work on his berms, and I don't know what they call it, but it's a landscaping cost-saving measure. I'm not a landscaping expert, but he didn't want to spend the extra money on that entrance, so it was cut out of the plans to be an entryway. What I'd also like to point out is that the person who voted it down was Vice Chairman Kessler. And the reason he did is they went through some things that they were abiding by. And number 7 was to encourage a collaborative process among developers, neighboring property owners and residents, governmental bodies in the community. The effect on development of surrounding property that the establishment of the special use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. I believe by confirming it to 2 entrances on Britcher Road, it doesn't meet that requirement. That's a quote from Vice Chairman Kessler. And I believe specifically that having the community with the density that will only enter and exit on Britcher Road causes it not to meet that requirement. So those are the reasons why he did not recommend and he did not vote for this project. This has a lot of merit. Traffic was discussed many times in this proposed project. Another thing I'd like to bring up is the traffic at Geneva Commons, the light we talked about last week, the cost, manpower that it's going to cost Geneva with this incoming traffic. Not only at Commons Drive, on Britcher, we talked about school buses last week. We're adding St. Charles school buses to our Britcher Road as well. Commons Drive, Randall and Britcher will get a lot busier. Fisher Drive, where we live and our families walk and bike every day, will get busier. Fisher and Kesslinger will be, I don't know if anybody has ever tried pulling out from Fisher Drive to Kesslinger. It's awful. Britcher and Peck, as the gentleman just described, is a traffic issue. We're adding to that 250 plus vehicles with this development. What if emergency vehicles can't get down Britcher to our neighborhood because of this backup? This traffic has to be addressed now before this goes in. We can't take a wait and see approach. That's not going to help our families or our city. And the cost. What about the cost it's going to cost Geneva? What about future widening of Britcher? I don't know if that's been talked about. I know there's a plan, there's a county plan, but I don't know the details of the widening of Britcher. I'm not sure that Geneva residents' best interest is being kept in the forefront here. This project, including the entryways as described in the IGA with the 2 off of Britcher Road only, it's only helping the city of St. Charles and its residents. Are you voting yes to something that is really good for Geneva residents here? Can we work on some other research about other alternatives as discussed last week? Were those checked into? I believe Alderman Cummings brought that up. Have we looked into other entryways? The residents of Geneva are going to be dealing with this traffic and safety, and that's what I believe you're voting on tonight. If you could please delay your vote to this yes, and look for some alternatives here. We will bear the brunt of this. The Geneva residents will bear the brunt of this project, and we're not getting the revenue for it. Please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Welcome.
My name is Nick Cooligan. I'm at 3322 Fisher Drive, and I'm a little bit new to this process here. I just heard of the Prairie Winds development, and I've been listening to all of my neighbors ask all my elected representatives here a lot of very good questions. I haven't heard an attempt to make one answer to those questions. So I would like to know whether we're speaking to potted plants,
No, sir.
or we are
I've
speaking
been
to our
taking
elected
copious
representatives.
notes on all the questions posed, and those questions will be answered once everyone has had a chance to speak and/or pose additional questions.
Okay. Well, our biggest concern, the one that everyone is addressing here, is the traffic. I also, being new to the process, have heard a lot of things. I want to know if they're true or not. I believe the agenda item has something to do about approving a deed or not approving a deed. I want to know exactly what was going on with this deed, and if filing that deed with the county would in any way prevent this development. And I'd also ask, I see our city attorney here, and I'd also ask that if the city attorney has reviewed any of the intergovernmental agreements and issued an opinion as to if there was any way of avoiding it as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
several years ago, and perhaps some of you that have been living there for as long as I have, one of our neighbors was hit by a car while riding her bicycle on Fisher Drive. She was pretty seriously injured. She had a head injury. She had a punctured lung. She spent 3 or 4 days in the hospital. And the person that hit her was not a resident of Fisher Farms. It was a person who was cutting through along Fisher Drive. Now, granted, bicycle accidents happen. People get hit by cars. But, you know, I have to think, you know, this was an isolated incident, thank God. It was one child, one accident that I'm aware of. But again, it happened on our public roadway by somebody who should not have been on that roadway, perhaps because they were using it as a shortcut.
Anyone else? Yes, welcome.
My name is Eileen Kelly. I live at 424 Mayborn Lane, the Villas of Fisher Farm. I've lived there for 15 years. I'm an original owner. I love Geneva. But I'm very concerned about what's going on here. I worked at Delner Hospital for 9 years. I'm now retired. But I know that there's a lot of traffic that comes from the north and the west, from Peck down to Britcher, down with the Fisher Farm. And it peaks in hours when there's shift changes. There's an extreme amount of traffic during this time. And I'm frankly very, very concerned about the fact that we're talking just one entrance in and out of the subdivision. And I agree with what everybody else has said so far. And I'm hoping that maybe we can hold off on a vote in this and discuss it a little bit more. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, ladies and gentlemen? Yes.
I'd like to also point out that the builder has expressed concerns about family in his apartment complex, yet he's not putting a park in. That doesn't show me that he really cares about family. So keep that in mind when you also decide if this is a go or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If the council would permit me, I'm going to endeavor to try to address all the questions posed. If I've missed one, by all means, just shout and let me know which one I missed. I think perhaps the most important question posed tonight is to ask the council members whether they've read the entire traffic report and all the information relative to this development. The short answer is no. In fact, I make it a habit not to ask the council members whether they've read anything, because I believe the council members come to all the meetings prepared. If they don't, I think it becomes self-evident that they're not prepared. So it's certainly not my responsibility to, quote, check up on whether the council members have done their homework, nor is it each council member's responsibility to check on with each other whether they've done theirs. That's my position. Secondly, with respect to the IGAs, or intergovernmental agreements, the gentleman to my left virtually wrote those agreements. I will certainly ask our city attorney to respond to my question, that is whether or not anything in those intergovernmental agreements have been reviewed or can be reviewed with respect to granting the City of Geneva authority to, quote, delay this project with respect to the 2 accesses off of Brisher Road.
Mr. Mayor, last week I attended the Committee of the Whole meeting and I think gave my verbal opinions or summarized the opinions that I'd given to you and to the city administrator before. The item on the agenda tonight has nothing to do with the intergovernmental agreements that have been amended for the last almost 30 years. Intergovernmental agreements between St. Charles and Geneva have been in existence for decades on various items, particularly roads, because there are several roads that the 2 communities share, including Division Street, Gray Street, Brisher Road. So the item on the agenda has nothing to do with that intergovernmental agreement, which was most recently amended about 3 or 4 years ago, that restructured where certain access or curb cuts were going to be located relative to the Lincoln Square development on the Geneva side, and where the future curb cuts would be on the north side, which really are the subject matter of the most current development in St. Charles. What's on the agenda tonight is whether the city takes title to the right-of-way, ownership from a deed standpoint for the north half of the right-of-way. When Fisher Farm was annexed to the city of Geneva in the mid-90s, as a matter of law, that annexation gave Geneva the control of Brisher Road to the far side. When I say the far side, the northerly side of the road. That's state law. So we've had control of the roadway since that annexation process. Since that time, there have been deeds passed to the city of Geneva when the Myers development came into play, and when Geneva Commons was developed around 2001, I believe. So this is, in a sense, a housekeeping matter to take the legal ownership via a deed of that right-of-way. If this council does not accept the deed, in my opinion, the city still has control and maintenance obligations of Brisher Road by virtue of the annexation of Fisher Farms in the mid-90s.
And then, Mr. City Attorney, following up, and I believe that this gentleman here asked the question, if the city council chooses not to accept or transfer the deed, does that have any bearing whatsoever on the Prairie Winds development?
No, in my opinion, no. I think what happens in that case is that the original landowner still retains ownership of certain land subject to the public's right-of-way over the northerly half of Brisher Road. I'm sure there were economic strategy reasons why the landowner wanted to get rid of the property and wanted to transfer to the city, but I don't see that has any bearing. It certainly wasn't a condition of the city of St. Charles's development approval for that project.
Continuing on with some of the questions posed, one was, have we spoken to the city of St. Charles? I can certainly share with you that I have spoken to Mayor Rogina and City Administrator Keenan on 4 separate occasions. The reality is, as I believe I've communicated to all those who have written to me or I've spoken with by phone, Prairie Winds is going to be developed, pure and simple. The opportunity that the city of Geneva had with respect to making recommendations relative to where we have authority, stormwater management, traffic issues, have been addressed. In fact, the traffic enhancements and recommendations were both accepted by and implemented into the final plan passed by the city of St. Charles. Mayor Rogina and Mr. Keenan and the entire city council in St. Charles is well aware of the discussion we've had over the course of the last couple weeks, and certainly I'll be providing them with a summary tomorrow as well. What I also wish to share on the off chance I haven't with all of you is, irrespective of the vote at the Plan Commission, and no disrespect to Commissioner Kessler, the reality is that at the city council level in St. Charles, this was a unanimous vote. But just in terms of providing information and transparency. So, were there alternative suggestions recommended? Yes, there was. As we all know, the first recommendation was a connector to Route 38. That was ruled, I use that term loosely, as not manageable by the developer at that time. It was accepted as not manageable by the Plan Commission and Council at that time. However, And I know Alderman Radecki and Alderman McGowan have chimed in on this as well. There is language within that, I believe, 73-page development agreement that states a connector road will be considered upon development of that northerly portion of that land. So, did I miss a question from anybody? And forgive me, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come to the podium since this is a public meeting. Thank you, sir. And forgive me in advance, I couldn't capture, is it Cooligan? Cooligan. Got it.
Yeah. And I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, but
Of course not.
why can't we just say no to a curb cut on Bricker? I know I wasn't out here at the last meeting, so maybe I missed that. But why can't Geneva just say no? Or tell them put it down more toward Peck Road?
Well, for those of you who received correspondence and/or spoken, I think with the majority of us, the intergovernmental agreement states in very clear terms, 2 curb cuts will be provided on Brisha Road per the relationship and agreement with the city of St. Charles.
Yeah, but what does it say, where?
Yes.
Okay,
It states pretty emphatically distance from, et cetera, so.
okay.
Yeah, just as a side note, it was determined at the same time that the curb cuts for the Lincoln Square development were made. And I think
And what if we just
Rich,
said,
if I'm correct, it was to coordinate the,
and what if we just did say no? I assume we would be sued, but, that might take quite some time to percolate through the system, and the developer might move on.
I doubt that.
What? You doubt that? Okay. I mean, that was just
No, it's,
a possibility.
anyone else? If I haven't answered or tried to answer any questions posed, please let me know. And obviously,
My ignorance, I'm a special education teacher, I'm not a realtor, I'm not an engineer, I'm not any of those things, so I'm going to try my best to take all this in.
doing great.
I have not yet heard, I don't believe, an explanation as to the reasoning and rationale behind the decision to allow a developer to build a mega complex in St. Charles and yet have the access to that complex fall in Geneva.
I believe my response to you may have summarized that. The reality is this, these are my words only. And you, I believe, answered your own question. This development is in St. Charles. St. Charles has the authority to review, consider, and approve the development, period. Based on the intergovernmental agreement, St. Charles is also granted 2 access points off of Brisha Road, as stated in that IGA, period.
So does that mean that the intergovernmental agreement is an agreement that is between the city of Geneva and the city of St. Charles, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the intergovernmental agreement, St. Charles comes to Geneva and says, we want to build this complex, but we want to have all the access points in Geneva.
No. St. Charles says to Geneva, we want to build this development. According to my review of the IGA, dear Geneva, we have these 2 access points off Brisher, correct? Correct. That's it.
Okay, how did that come to be then? I guess I need to know that.
Well, forgive me if I don't know the exact dates, but this goes back to 1997 or 2001, I believe it is.
well, I think it starts in 1989. It's amended in 97. It's amended in 2001. 97 when Fisher Farms came in. 2001 when Geneva Commons was more or less developed. And in 2014 with the modification for Lincoln Square and the 2 curb cuts on the north side, which is the subject matter of our discussion tonight.
Is this something that happens regularly, that cities will gift land or curb cuts or whatever you want to call it to other cities?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, in fact, we have a relationship with our friends to the east in West Chicago, where that boundary agreement establishes certain opportunities along a roadway that is yet to be built. We have it with our friends in Batavia and elsewhere. Yes, it's a common practice. It's a common, I believe, a best practices planning process as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And by all means, anyone else in the council, feel free to chime in. But good evening.
Good evening. Nancy Beauregard, 517 Mayborn Lane. I'm a retired teacher, and I don't get it either. I'm sitting here saying, okay, so back in the day, there was this IGA, which is commonly done between communities or among communities.
Correct.
Okay. Why would an IGA be important for Fisher Farms when, if I am correct, Geneva has always owned Britcher? Then why would there have to be an IGA when you're accessing onto a Geneva-owned road? This, to me, is totally different. It's a different community accessing onto a different community's road. So Lincoln Square and Fisher Farms go onto Geneva property. So that's where I am totally confused, how legally this IGA works for St. Charles accessing a Geneva road.
Ma'am, an IGA is a contract, so
Yes.
it's a binding contract
Legal.
between the two communities.
Correct.
Authorized by state law, authorized by the Illinois 1970 Constitution. The IGA in 2001 was really to allocate who is going to pay for all the improvements to Brisher Road that were involved in both the Myers and the Fisher Farms and the Geneva Commons development. So there was lots of road construction.
Could I
For those
interrupt
interse-
there?
Well, hang on a second, ma'am.
Well,
For those that road construction include traffic signalization, expansion of the roadway, resurfacing of Brisher Road, I think all the way out to Peck, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a intergovernmental agreement that, at that time, in 2001, that was designed to determine what property owners were going to pay what, and then who was going to supervise the road construction. And it not only was for the west side of Randall Road, but it also included improvements to the east side of Randall Road from Brisher to Route 38, or almost to Route 38, as I recall, and the allocation. So it was more details than just who was going to get curb cuts. It was also the reconstruction of that road for development purposes.
So are you indicating that the Meyer Lowe's, I'd call it more, the Lowe's cut onto the Geneva Road is a precedent for what we're doing now? Because the other side of the Commons is in Geneva. So,
It included both sides of the road, included both the north and the south side of the road, on both the east and the west side of Randall Road. So it included things like Arden Court, on the southeast corner of Randall and Brisher. It included other curb cuts on that segment of Brisher Road from Randall to Route 38.
so are they considered legally precedents then, or is it just that?
It's just part of.
It's just part of the agreement?
Part of the contract,
And it was last amended when, please?
2014.
And that amendment was for
Lincoln Square and
which
the,
comes
and,
onto Geneva property.
well, this is where, see, I never can get a word in edgewise with a teacher, can I?
Well, no, it's just, at my age, no, seriously, at my age, I
All
ask
my
the
life.
question when I think of it.
And my
It
wife was a
truly is-
teacher too, so
It
it's,
truly is
I
not,
feel
is
at
not,
home.
I'm not trying to preach, trust me.
I think your question was whether
And it
there.
was last
It was
amended,
2014 and was
and it
for
cannot
both
be,
sides of those roads.
and it cannot be amended now?
Oh, sure it can by agreement of the two cities.
And if one agrees and one doesn't, what happens?
It's not an agreement.
So then the agreement's broken.
No, the agreement is in place right now. You said amend it. The amendment requires the two parties to agree.
I just still have a difficult time understanding how we're getting shafted because of Fisher Farms and the Commons. It just, it's interesting. It's political. I get it.
Mrs. Husky?
So if I understand you correctly, the signing over of this deed tonight does not delay start of this project. So in the April 17th city council meeting at St. Charles, Mayor Regina and I quote, "They have to sign off on the final plat, excuse me." So if they're not waiting for us to do this, why haven't they broken ground yet? Like, obviously, this is a legality that has to happen before they break ground and start this project.
Mr. Babica, do you wish to address that? I mean, I have my own thoughts on it. And forgive me for stating this in front of our respected members of the press, but not everything we read in the paper is entirely accurate. The fact of the matter is, as you know, Mrs. Husky, the minutes of those meetings in St. Charles indicated two things. Number one, they'd break ground by May 1.
Right.
Number two, they'd have substantial improvements already by July 1 with respect to some of the major structures, including the clubhouse, et cetera. I cannot speculate as to why a developer hasn't already broken ground. It could be a permit issue, it could be, God knows. But I've been advised by council, I've been advised by others, that irrespective of what action the Geneva City Council takes, this has no material impact on this project moving forward.
Okay, so you could all vote no to sign over this deed, and they break ground tomorrow, and they go on.
Ma'am, the deed
my
has
understanding.
nothing to do with the plat of
Okay.
subdivision
Okay.
that these developers in St. Charles. That's a different document. That's a different document. The deed is from the landowner who sold the property to the developer up in St. Charles. That's who
Okay.
the deed from. It's not from the developer. It's from Mr. Dempsey, who was the original landowner. The plat of subdivision is another document, and that's not before this city council.
Okay.
I don't know if
Okay.
it's even.
Then I stand corrected. Okay.
I'm not even sure that it's been presented to any staff member in the city. I don't
Okay.
know.
So your understanding is they're not waiting for this vote tonight, and they do not need it? Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if that's the case, then if you are all our elected officials and Mayor Burns as well, what is your plan for helping with this traffic that you're basically mandating to come through our neighborhoods? Like, I haven't found a plan anywhere, and this wait and see, let's wait a few years, let's see how bad it gets. The residents don't deserve that. I mean, where is the plan? It's gonna be an influx of traffic, we all know that. Where's the plan to keep our neighborhoods safe is in regards to traffic down Richer Road and the neighboring roads in our neighborhoods? Where is that plan? Because you all and St. Charles are giving it to us, the traffic.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Will we be making our comments under the agenda item or during this?
I think we'll do it now, since I have corresponded with a number of folks. Again, forgive me for sounding repetitive. I have stated emphatically, and I hope clearly, that we as a community, we as an official body, representative body of this community, who have sworn to uphold the state laws, those state laws include our inability to make whatever improvements we all may think is necessary now in anticipation of what we think might occur in the future. We simply can't do so. I had a lovely conversation today with one of your neighbors. The old days of Geneva, respectfully, when someone called and said, I want a stop sign was put up, and the warrants weren't met. And then when accidents occurred or something happened, the city was sued as well. Mitigating our risk by doing what we think is right now, based on whether or not things materialize, is simply not within our power. We cannot do that. But as you've heard from the chief of police, or perhaps have been given this information from other council members who you corresponded with, our chief of police, Mr. Eric Passarelli, has already identified Fisher Road as a high priority road. Monitoring will continue on that road. That's not monitoring those who don't live here. It's monitoring speed, et cetera, as it would be on Brisher Road as well. And when and if certain warrants are met or certain situations rise to the level that Mr. Radovich, Ms. Dawkins, or anyone else on this dais or myself contact our friends in St. Charles and say, listen, we've reached a problem now where A, let's do a study, or B, let's share the study, or C, enough's enough, let's investigate options where we can share in those costs, we will do so, absolutely. Absolutely, we will do so. I know that's probably not the answer you want, but I want to just perhaps amplify what I've said before so that everyone has the benefit of hearing it, so. And then you're next.
Right. As you know, I'm very educated in all this. I understand
I know.
everything, yes. They've taught you a few things over the last week. This has not been brought up at all, and I have no idea on this one. Is there going to be curbs put in on Britcher? Is there going to be sewer system put in? Because right
absolutely.
now, it's just a runoff.
Absolutely.
And
It has to be
then-
fully improved land in order to accommodate the development, yes.
Okay, so then on the St. Charles side, when the sewer system's put in, who's going to pay for that?
The developer pays for that, and then that sewer system is managed by the developer and overseen by the city of St. Charles. I think you and I talked a little bit about stormwater management. That's one of the issues with respect to stormwater management.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Hi.
I'm Karen Maloney, and I live in Fisher Farms as well. I had no intention of speaking tonight, but something to ponder further down the road. I back up to Kesslinger, and I live in Fisher Farms. And every day I have to make that left out of the subdivision. And every day when I'm leaving at lunchtime, because I come home to lunch, I work nearby, one of the perks of working and living in Geneva, within 1 week, there were 3 accidents. I'm waiting to make my left. There's an accident off to my right, an accident off to my left. People just going down Kesslinger. You have the hill coming one way and the hill coming the other. You have all the teachers and people going into the hospital, turning off of Kesslinger onto Fisher in the morning. You have the school buses coming through. You have people trying to go to work. I really see that as a really big issue for us living in that subdivision with the additional traffic that's going to be coming through. And I'm concerned with the kids that are driving, trying to get out of that. I mean, not everybody has, we can't even make a left to go up to Williamsburg and get out at the light because sometimes the traffic is so bad. So in the future, I hope that you'll consider that and you'll really start to look at that intersection because even though we're talking about Britcher Road, I think Kesslinger is going to be hit hard. And we have businesses across on Kesslinger as well. And there are large trucks that come in and out of there, and they kind of screw up the traffic pattern. And when you're coming up and down that hill, you don't see it. And I've seen too many accidents since I've lived here, so I just would hope you would address that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? From the dais? Alderman Bruno, then Alderman Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd kind of like to expand a little bit on one of your points in terms of what warrants we have for adding signalization and adding signage. Were the traffic study to have shown traffic with to represent an obvious problem, that traffic study would have given us, correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Radovich, that traffic study would have given us warrant to add that signage. Short of that, my understanding is that, as the mayor said, any additional signage, any additional signalization has to be backed up by a documented issue with traffic or safety. Is that correct, roughly?
Yeah. Not all, but actually, the Public Works Director is probably more in tune with, and in fact, last week he cited the Uniform Motor Traffic Code as far as the requirements for any kind of signage, stop sign, yield sign, traffic signal, lane markings. It can't just be put ad hoc or randomly without those kinds of engineering studies to back it up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at this and, and I think it's pretty clear. What the item we're voting on tonight has, whether we vote yea or nay, has no bearing on whether this moves forward. It's not that there's not empathy with traffic concerns, and I think we'll be looking at it very closely. I know I will be. I'll be discussing with the police chief Kesslinger Safety have made some of those left turns, and, yeah, they're not the most comfortable intersections. So we will be keeping an eye on this, and as changes are warranted, I'd be happy to endorse any change that improves it. Thank you.
Alderman Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you get a chance last week to talk to Mayor Rogina?
I stated earlier I did, and I've spoken to him 4 separate occasions.
And what was that conversation?
The conversation was that I brought to the mayor concerns expressed by multiple residents concerning the development already approved by the city of St. Charles. Mayor Regina accepted those concerns in the manner in which they were given, and that was the extent of it. This matter will not be reopened or re-adjudicated or reconsidered by the city of St. Charles. Would you have preferred something different?
Would I have?
Well, I know you would have, but did you make a call yourself to your colleague in St. Charles?
Yeah, I did, and it was at 4:35 and the offices had closed. So,
To an alderman?
no, to Mayor, to Rogina.
Today?
Yeah. I understand that regardless of how we vote tonight, this may not change the outcome of what St. Charles is going to do. However, I do think that some amount of pushback in a situation like this can be helpful for negotiations either at the present or in the future. It's the little things. I stopped taking Uber and began taking Lyft when Uber was blowing up. Uber doesn't care if I drive Uber or not. But at some point, when enough people complain about something and an issue is raised, things do change, and I have faith in that. I went through years of not buying clothing from certain areas because it was frustrating to me to know what was going on there. Somehow, I think St. Charles very clearly has to be made aware that, number one, we respect the IGA, the Intergovernmental Agreement. Number two, agreements, I believe, contain a few things, some direction, but also some intent. And they're almost made to be renegotiated when times change. If this was indeed first formulated, the IGA, back in the late 80s, early 90s, if we were to look at Google Maps from 1990 of 38 and Randall and moving southwest from there, I think it would look very different. As things change, we need to dance with those changes. I think some changes need to be made. I'm looking at the Google map of this, and I would love to be able to say to Ray, you know what, we, City of Geneva, we, the aldermen, we screwed up. We've got a situation here that is dangerous and going to get more dangerous. It will not get less dangerous when this development is put in. The absolute best we could hope for is that this is neutral in all respects. And intuitively, I would say that's highly unlikely. And I understand when problems come up that perhaps we'll re-examine this. And so are those problems one bicyclist getting hit or two bicyclists getting hit or perhaps three? Do we need 3 T-bone type accidents from Brisher and the new street to. That's kind of what we're thinking about here. Even if this doesn't, even if we vote no, and it doesn't change a thing, it hopefully sends a signal that the friction on something like this is increasing. And by increasing that friction, increasing the pushback, perhaps all of us, St. Charles and Geneva, will look at things harder, will understand that things aren't static, and that there does need to be some flexibility. This situation needs flexibility. We may not have it right now, but I'm not one to say just because you can't do anything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. The something we can do right now is vote no on this, continue to push back, let St. Charles know that we have an issue with this, hear the neighbors that have very legitimate concerns, and then move forward. Thank you.
Alderman McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm by no means the expert on this, but I just want to address your comments there, Alderman Cummings. I applaud your take on this, and well, I also want to say, you know, I appreciate everyone from Fisher Farms or anyone who came and spoke at tonight's meeting. I really understand your frustration. I've lived in the area myself for many years, and I know that the traffic is bad. I know it's difficult to make left-hand turns. I know that the Prairie Winds development will only increase the amount of traffic that's already there. And truly, I wish that there was more that we could do, like, right now. And it's frustrating, I think, for me to be in the situation where, you know, we just can't tell St. Charles what to do. It's their land. They're legally entitled to build there. And that doesn't make me or anyone else feel any better, but those are the facts. But I think you're right. This, the vote that we have tonight is just for that little narrow strip of land along Britcher. And I've asked the mayor, the city attorney has chimed in on this. I've spoken with Rich Babica, the director of public works, and I've asked repeatedly, just to clarify, will our vote on this, accepting this little strip of land on a portion of the north side of Britcher have any bearing whatsoever on this development going in? And the answer has always been no. There is no bearing whatsoever. So, Alderman Cummings, I'm just concerned that by you, obviously vote any way you want, but by you voting no, you're kind of continuing this misconception, because people who maybe aren't here at the meeting tonight are gonna latch onto the fact that you voted no, and it's gonna give people a false hope, or think that we as a council could have all voted no, and then somehow stopped the development. So I understand why you're doing that, but I don't really feel like it's fair to kind of, well, I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think it's gonna be confusing people who aren't here and getting the full story. So that is it. And I'm sorry, Director Babica, would you be so kind as to come up and just explain once more for the record why the strip of land, the thing that we're voting on tonight that's on the agenda, really has no, you know, will not control one way or another the Prairie Winds development from going in?
Alderman McGowan, if I may
Okay,
interrupt,
or-
I'd like to ask the city attorney to either repeat what's already been said or perhaps in a different format, share it again.
I think I would just be regurgitating what I said a little earlier, that the annexation of Fisher Farms in the mid-90s was the controlling event that caused the city of Geneva to take control and maintenance of Brisher Road all along the lineal dimensions of Fisher Farms, and if I'm not mistaken, I think all of, from Peck Road to the commons was done initially, there may have been a holdout at what is now Prairie Ridge. That was a separate unit for a while, but at least a majority of the property adjoining Brisher Road south was annexed to the city of Geneva at that time, which triggered the control and maintenance to the far side, again, to the far north right-of-way of Brisher Road. So we've had that control and obligation. Someone mentioned earlier, I think Mark Kanan, who is the current city administrator in St. Charles, made apparently that same statement. Mark was city public works director, and before that, city engineer, and was a part of some of these agreements. So he has as much history on these intergovernmental agreements as anyone. So that's what triggered Geneva's control over Brisher Road. The conveyance of this land under item 12A from Mr. Dempsey from his trust to the city is really, I think, his effort to transfer ownership of that property so that he doesn't have any remnants of ownership, because he, as I believe, has already conveyed the balance of the property to the developers of this new development. And so if the city doesn't accept the transfer of this property, he'll own it. That is, Mr. Dempsey will still own it. But in my opinion, the city of Geneva will still have the maintenance and control maintenance obligation and control of Brisher Road by virtue of the Illinois Municipal Code provisions that give us that control behind the annexation of property.
Mr. Cooligan? Yes, sir. Mr. Radecki.
The question I would have is, has that property from that trust already been sold to the developer, or is that sale?
I have no idea. I know that it was going to happen this month. I don't know if it's happened or not, sir.
Would the conveyance of this deed affect the marketability of that title?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Marketability of that title?
Yeah. Would it create a title exception to that transfer?
I'm not going to make an opinion on that. It's not my purview to give a title opinion on somebody else's property. But I will tell you that it would still,
well,
if the city council doesn't accept the deed, it's still title to that property is still going to be in Mr. Dempsey's trust, subject to the title exception of the public's right to use that land for public road purposes. Okay?
So we don't know if, so you're saying we don't know if this vote would affect that transaction. It's possible that it could affect the title of that.
The question, sir, asked to me was whether or not the city of Geneva has a continuing obligation with regard to Brisher Road, and I've already answered that several times.
I'm asking a different question.
And I don't think that's in my purview to make that opinion.
It would be ill-advised for a city of Geneva attorney who represents the city council to opine on a matter before the St. Charles City Council with respect to property.
Why?
For the simple reason, sir, this is a development in St. Charles.
Yeah, however, this affects the, whether or not
Actually,
the city of Geneva
No,
owns
sir.
that.
No, sir, it does not. Irrespective of what transpires here this evening.
Well, it would affect whether the city of Geneva owns that strip of land, and if by the city of Geneva owning that strip of land, it might affect the ability to it might create a blind on the title of that tract and might be able to stop that transaction. And it's
So if I hear you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you believe that if this city council takes action and rejects the deed transfer, there's hope that the entire project will be killed.
I don't know. I'm asking
Is
if
that
the
not
city.
your hope?
That is my hope, and I'm asking if the city council has examined that and whether, what the effect of the transfer would be other than the jurisdiction over the road in terms of the title to that trust and its effect on that transaction.
Alderman Radecki, and then Mrs. Husky.
Thank you. First of all, like everybody else, I share in the frustration. I've gotten all the emails. I think I understand. I know how you feel. I get it. I've had conversations with several people. I think that, you know, we've asked the question and we've asked the question and we've asked the question and we've gotten the answer and we've gotten the answer and we've gotten the answer. My opinion is that it would be disingenuous of this council to not clear up a 20-some-year-old housekeeping matter in the far, 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 far remote hope that it would be able to kill this project. I think there are better ways and better things to be gained from this than an attempt to do that. I think it's our responsibility to not only the person that is still in their trust, to clear up what the agreement was from years ago. This is a public right-of-way. This is not going to change things. We've been maintaining it. We continue to maintain it. I think it's dilatory of us to think that we should neglect doing what is right on that in an attempt to try to affect the project in another town. With that said, I think that to continue to dwell on the same questions that are over and over, I think it's more important to learn something from the experience, and I think there's two things that we can do better and that we should take steps in improving. Number one is communication. Geneva itself we've decided as a council, our notification to our own residents, we've doubled the scope, the distance, the amount of people that we notify. We have taken some measures. No matter what we do, there'll never be enough, but I get it that that's just to our residents with projects that affect us. I think that perhaps we can do a better job with notifying our residents with projects that abut our city. I know that Alderman McGowan did post something about this a couple of weeks. I think you weren't even an alderman yet about it to warn people. I think we can do better than that. The second thing, and I don't know how to go about this, I did call the alderman from St. Charles, Maureen Lewis, who that is her ward where that project is being developed, and I had a lengthy conversation with her about it. And in the end, you know, it was pretty clear from her that, you know, the project was going to go forward, that they were not considering making alterations to the project. She did acknowledge the concerns that we had. She did say that they insisted that there was language put into the ordinance where there would be consideration for an entrance to be put on Route 38 into the project. Of course, that's little consolation to you. There's no teeth into that whatsoever. Nobody should have any false hope by that. But what she did suggest and what we talked about is to have more collaboration, and I know we legally have to be careful with how many aldermen talk outside of public meetings, but more collaboration amongst the aldermen with our adjoining counterparts, our neighboring groups. And I think there was some talk at some point about of forming some groups that we would get together and discuss these things far in advance before they become things that we can't do anything about. So I think those are the two things that I want to see as the takeaway from this is any possibilities that we can do with notifying our citizens, because we have the same thing in Batavia with Campana going on now. It's the same thing all over again. So that's something I think that maybe we should have a goal and objective, and perhaps when we prioritize our goals in November, this might be a good topic for us to have a discussion about. But second, also, I'd like to hear any thoughts that the mayor or anybody has as far as having more collaboration amongst our peers with our neighboring communities. Thank you.
Mrs. Husky? Excuse me. Mrs. Husky?
Can you explain a little bit more about your conversation with Mayor Regina last week when we asked you, last week, when we asked you, can you call him, being concerned residents, can you call him and see if there's anything we could do, maybe discuss alternate entryways, possibilities? Was that discussed with him, or was it just, here are my residents' concerns?
Well, I mean, obviously, I can't, well, at the fear of sounding like Trump and Comey, let me Mayor Regina and City Administrator Kanan watched the broadcast of this meeting last week. I asked them to watch it prior to my phone call,
Right.
so they could gain the flavor of the discussion. Upon me reaching both of them via conference call, I asked them what they thought. Paraphrasing, of course, this is not verbatim, summarizing some of the concerns with respect to some of the email correspondence and some of the telephone conversations, and of course, this meeting on May the 5th, or excuse me, the
Eighth.
8th. It was noted rather directly, but respectfully, that, and I'm paraphrasing, that I certainly hope you're not asking or demanding, nor is your council or community meaning professional staff principally, for this matter to be renegotiated, because that's not going to happen.
So when we say the word intergovernmental agreement, agreement to me means two mutually agreed parties, mutually beneficial to each party. When I make an agreement with someone, I expect and hope that it's mutual beneficial to each party. I don't feel like this agreement is or was, and that's just out there. I know it's out there, and it's not benefiting the city of Geneva or the residents. You know, we have after the meeting last week, we were urged by some, I don't remember who told us to take it up with the city of St. Charles, and some of us did contact him. I know we're rather late in this, but we did contact him, and he did refer, and I just want to just be transparent with you as well on how he treated this matter with us, being residents of Geneva. He compared this to the Red Gate Bridge project, and he said we're going to thank him someday as the people who opposed the Red Gate Bridge project in St. Charles. They thanked him now. I don't think bringing all this traffic into Fisher Farms and the surrounding neighborhoods in Geneva, I don't think we're going to thank him down the road. I'm just putting that out there because that was said to us by the mayor of St. Charles. And I just hope that you can come to an agreement with him to work towards managing this traffic and keeping our families safe. I have a new driver in the next year, and there are going to be accidents on that road. That road is not wide enough to handle even the turn lanes that are going to be put in there. It's not wide enough to handle it. There will be accidents. So I hope that you can make an agreement with him to help keep our roads safe. That's all I'm asking for. So I hope that happens, because it seems like this agreement, the IGA, is not mutually beneficial.
That agreement has been reached. That agreement will continue to be sustained. Mayor Regina and Mark Kanan said, and I guarantee you every council member in St. Charles will say to every council member in Geneva, that yes, we will be cooperative and collaborative on making improvements as those improvements are deemed necessary and important. To buy into the hyperbole, and I'm not speaking to you directly, but you're at the podium, is sometimes dangerous and more dangerous than what's been achieved. We've heard comments from this dais about how many kids is it going to take to be hit until we do something right. That's ridiculous. Absolutely unfounded. If in fact anyone wishes to stand up here or write to me or call me or text me and say, if someone dies, it's on your shoulders, come on. We're doing the darn best we can. In fact, and I've said this to all of you, thanks to Mr. Babica, thanks to our independent third-party consultant, if it weren't for those recommendations and our concern over the accuracy of the original traffic report, the improvements that we see now would not be there. Would not be there. It is a delicate balance, there's no question about it. I have absolutely no hesitation at all calling my friend Ray saying, what's up, dude? We need some help here. But when the council in St. Charles has voted unanimously and stated to Alderman Radecki and others that it's a done deal. And what frustrates me, and only me, others can chime in, is when we hear through third parties that either A, choose to be anonymous, or B, choose to stoke the flames of fear through correspondence or otherwise, that a official in St. Charles said, yeah, the city of Geneva can still object to this. Yet not one official has said, that was me. That's tough. You know, my comment would be, who was the official?
I don't know what you're talking about. We were hopeful that this will make a difference in our neighborhoods. I mean, I don't know anything about officials and what they said outside of this. I'm
And I think
concerned with
all
my
of you-
family,
the others, of course,
and I'm
are.
concerned with my neighborhood, and
As
this
are
wait
all
and
of
see
us.
approach. We're not just sitting on roads that are not going to be increased in traffic. Like, we're not just going to be like, traffic as it is today is going to be traffic as it is on these roads in 2 to 5 years. We know the numbers are coming in, right? We know the numbers are coming in. That's not I mean, you cannot wait and see and put a Band-Aid on this in 5 years. Like, now is the time to help us keep our roads safe. Sitting and not doing anything, whether any of this vote has some difference or not, I understand that. But we need to proactively do something to keep these roads safe.
May I ask
An
you a
abundance
question
of vehicles will
respectfully,
be on
what would you
them.
recommend?
I don't know, I'm not a traffic expert, but you're the one, and St. Charles is the one who is giving us all this traffic. I didn't give it to us. Like, it's coming in our roadways, in our neighborhoods, where our kids bike, where my son is learning to drive, where we bike to work at, or we walk and bike and drive around. Like, we need you to help us because, if you were a part of this plan or not, it's coming on the Geneva side. And somehow St. Charles got a really great deal with this complex. And now we need your help. And we're looking to you for help. So I'm not a traffic expert. I'm not a cop. All I know is that there's going to be problems. And if we can't do anything about this complex, please help us with those problems now, not sit back and wait for 5 years when we've had issues. Like, the numbers are coming in now. As soon as they break ground and they start renting those apartments, the numbers are coming on our roads. The cars are coming on our roads. And I think waiting and seeing is not conducive to helping the Geneva residents.
Thank you.
Mayor, you asked Kelly what she thought you could do to help with the situation. And I think I heard several minutes ago that amendments to IGAs happen.
Correct.
I think that we residents of Fisher Farms in Geneva are owed at least the question to St. Charles. Would you consider an amendment to this so that we can be fair about how we're developing this? I don't think anybody here is suggesting that we don't want the development to go forward. I don't care if they want to put up those apartments, that's fine. But don't put the drive or the entrances into Geneva. And I have to ask this question. It's if this were a strip joint going in on this, would you be fighting this?
Well, speaking of hyperbole, Madam, we enjoyed the presence of a strip joint, to use your word, for 25, 30 years, located due east of town. And we received I'm trying to think of the best word, an avalanche of comments saying, how dare you? It was located in Kane County. If this was a strip joint, to use your words, I wouldn't have to get involved, because all hell would break loose. I'd most likely be hiring additional officers to keep people from traipsing over the north end of Brisher Road, but short answer is, I would not be pleased.
You would not be what?
Pleased. I would not be pleased. But let's not equate folks who rent apartments with strip clubs. I think that's, well, 1 second, sir, you're not recognized. This young lady is, and then Alderman Maladra, then Alderman Bruno, then you, Mr. Cooligan.
This is what I was asking before about the IGA, so
Yes.
that was all new to me. And I've been sitting here thinking this whole time, yes, it's a legal document, and kind city attorney explained that it cannot be amended. The agreement cannot be amended is exactly.
Didn't say that, no.
An IGA can be amended
Then what
frequently.
did you say? Because I asked, I said, well, it was amended last, and you said it could not be amended.
I said both parties need to agree to have an effective amendment, ma'am.
Okay, so here's my question. Can you get rid of the IGA legally? You're going to tell me it's a totally binding agreement that nobody can work around? Because the IGA is the issue. Sure, the complex is coming in, and that's wonderful for St. Charles tax base, wonderful. But because of these two accesses onto Geneva property, hence the IGA is controlling that, to me, the focus for those of us with the access issue is, can anything be done about the IGA?
If I understand your question, I hear you saying, can we, quote, amend the IGA now?
Well, yes.
The answer is no. The development has been approved based on the language within the existing IGA. For us to say, oh, by the way, we don't like what you developed in the access, therefore we pull the rug out, we can't. I can't imagine this council
And
would
was
support
that all publicized, that, you know, the accesses were going to be there on Geneva property? And, because I've just really come into this, and I know
Right.
these other people have been researching a long time. But it almost seems like, well, we can't do anything because this was done before, but you really didn't know about it.
Was it duly notified? Yes. Publicized? Yes. Based on law? Yes. To Mr. Adeki's point,
Sure.
were there 10,000 pieces of material sent to every resident in St. Charles advising them? No.
Not St. Charles, I'm talking about Geneva.
Well, Geneva,
The affected people in Geneva.
well, correct. The answer is no.
So nothing can be done for the IGA. So in other words, this is what's going to be. So we can just keep talking and talking, and nothing's going to change. Is that correct?
This evening, that is correct. In my opinion, yes.
Well, what is going to happen that could change it? I'm hearing nothing
Well,
from the attorney.
well,
Because St. Charles isn't going to say, okay, yeah, we
Exactly.
can see this is not mutually, beneficial, so we'll change. They're not going to do that.
exactly.
So
They're not.
what can we do, which is what?
Nothing. We can continue to monitor the traffic issues that may or may not evolve. We can continue to work cooperatively with St. Charles in terms of making traffic mitigation improvements. We all know that Randall Road's designated to be a 6-lane road someday, not just 4. All these issues come into play. All we can do, in my opinion, is abide by the agreements we have in place, provide a voice with respect to those areas where we have authority, traffic, stormwater management, and that's the best we can do.
And this IGA dates back to 1988?
Well, the original, and then it's been amended in 1997, 2001, and
So
again
we
2014.
could have amended it, but, oh well, too late, because it's already a done deal. Is that what you're saying? We could have, like we did with Fisher Farms, we could have amended the IGA if we had our acts together before St. Charles approved these 2 accesses. Is that,
Well, based on your logic, madam, respectfully, then we should eliminate all IGAs with all neighboring properties and just wait.
works for me and renegotiate.
I know it does.
Works for me.
It doesn't
and
work for me.
Renegotiate.
Alderman, or, excuse me, Mr. Cooligan, then Alderman Maladra.
With all due respect to you, Mr. Mayor, I
Yes, sir.
believe you owe my neighbor an apology. You implied that you equated apartment, and people who lives in apartments with strippers. I heard nothing of the kind. So I don't think that was called for on your part.
Okay. My apology if you somehow, I interpreted your comments to mean that those who rent apartments are also strippers. My apologies, but I will not apologize for the following. When I receive emails from people saying, oh my God, those who rent are somehow less than those who own. Because that offends me, that offends my daughters who live in apartments, that offends a number of folks on this council who also rent. As far as Geneva is concerned, whether you rent or own, you're still a resident of this community. Whether you rent or own in St. Charles, you're still a member of this greater Tri-City community. If this is in fact going to be the debate and dialogue we're going to have when the St. Charles Mall is developed with nearly 3 times as many apartments, then it's going to be one heck of a long Monday evening in perpetuity. St. Charles Mall, ladies and gentlemen, that's a whole different subject. Alderman Maladra.
So I was going to pretty much be quiet and just listen to how things went, but it's getting interesting. So I'll begin by saying I assume that none of you ever take Williamsburg or Caneville or Kesslinger to get downtown, because we don't like cut-through traffic. So you stick to the major roads. If you're going downtown Geneva, you go Randall to 38 and over. No, you probably don't. You probably drive through somebody's neighborhood. And that's what we're reacting to here. We don't want people driving through your neighborhood. We're talking about walking away from what is essentially a contract when we find out that that contract may not be as advantageous to us as it seemed when we signed it. Somehow that seems to me to be a little bit shady and show that we really don't have a moral backbone. We're talking about showing that we don't have a moral backbone so that we can somehow force St. Charles into getting a connection from this property onto Route 38. I think that might be a great idea. In fact, I think it makes total common sense for that to happen for northbound traffic. I do not think southbound traffic is going to exit on Route 38. I think southbound traffic is going to exit on Britcher Road. So all the traffic that you're worried about going through your neighborhood is probably going to go through your neighborhood, whether there's an exit on Route 38 or not. Will this development bring southbound traffic? Absolutely. How much? Don't know. Would any development on this property bring southbound traffic? Probably. Is some sort of retail on this property, which I guess is what it was zoned prior to it being zoned residential, be less intensive than residential? Retail traffic generates 3 times, 5, I don't know the exact numbers, but it generates many more trips than residential traffic does. So somehow, as I look at this property, I really don't see any way of keeping southbound traffic from going southbound by whatever means it's going to take, short of building walls, which I don't think anybody is intending. So I would like, as the mayor said, I would like the hyperbole to end. I don't like the implication that we don't care. We do. I would like to look at it rationally. I think that, as Alderman Radecki said, we need to build a partnership with our neighbors to the north, and we have to start working with them to get that exit onto Route 38. But I don't want anybody to mistake it as being the be-all to end-all. Really, do you think southbound traffic is going to do that? So you've all said we don't oppose this going in, but when it goes in, there will be southbound traffic. It's going to happen. The intersection at Britcher, the red lights at the Commons Drive and Randall Road, those are not the best. And I believe at some point the warrants will require change, whatever went on this property. So I'd like the heat to just die down a little bit, and let's look at it sort of rationally and say, what are we going to do positively to move forward? And I don't think you move forward positively by walking away from a contract. I think what the mayor was saying is to come to them now after the development has been approved and ask for renegotiation, that's dumb. That's not common sense. To have gone to them before this development to renegotiate the contract would have required some sort of presence of mind to say, we are bothered by what you might someday put here. So let's just work on it in a cooperative and positive fashion, leaving the dispersions aside, and I think we'll actually get somewhere. Thanks.
Alderman Bruno?
Thank you, Mayor. Sort of to Becky's part of the discussion. Thank you. To Alderman Radecki's comments in some portion, since our last discussion of this last week, I'm pretty confident, knowing the people here, that some or all of us have gotten pretty familiar with that situation, whether it's our ward or not, looked into all the concerns, traffic safety, the rest of it. We have consulted with experts. I've spoken with police. Fact is, there seems no latitude for me as a council person to somehow throw a wrench into something that all the experts say can work. As far as the curb cuts there, the attorney might correct me, but that's a parcel of land we're not allowed to deny access to property. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Yeah, without getting into detail, we can't deny access to property. 200 units, I would probably guess that one entrance to 200 apartment units is probably substandard and problematic for any development of that size. To that, I don't think we've been hearing new concerns now. We've looked at the IGA, we've looked at traffic, we've looked at safety, we've looked at the extra things we've gotten through our negotiations. So I would like to make a motion that we call the question on this.
There is no question, regrettably. This is a
Oh, that's-
public comment section. Public comment can continue as... Ms. Ahern? No problem.
I would like to make one correction that everyone seems to not understand right now, is there will not be an access to 38 from this. The way the building is set, the buildings are set, there will not be an access. Even if they put a road back there, it will not go to this apartment. So that needs to stop being said, because that's not happening. Based on the plans that were submitted, there was no access over there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, to item 4 on the agenda, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments? Oop, excuse me. Item 5, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments this evening? Item 6 is the omnibus agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are considered to be routine by this council and can be considered and acted upon with one motion.
So moved.
Alderman Bruno makes the motion. Alderman Marks makes the second. Any questions or comments regarding the omnibus agenda? Jean, may I trouble you for the roll call?
Mike Bruno?
Aye.
Tara Burkhart?
Aye.
Donald Cummings?
Aye.
Becky Ruby?
Aye.
Dean Kilburg?
Aye.
Craig Maladra?
Aye.
Richard Marks?
Aye.
Jean McGowan?
Aye.
Jim Radecki?
Aye.
Robert Swanson?
Aye.
Item 6 passes unanimously. We jump down to item number 11, municipal bills for payment. We kindly ask our recording secretary, Ms. Fernari, to read the bills in their aggregate and available online and in our packets.
Thanks for saving the time.
Municipal bills for payment this evening are in the amount of $3,468,695.26.
So moved.
Motion by Bruno.
Second.
Seconded by Marks to pay the bills as presented and available in our packets and on the city's website. Any questions or comments? Jean, please take the roll.
Mike Bruno?
Aye.
Tara Burkhart?
Aye.
Donald Cummings?
Aye.
Becky Ruby?
Aye.
Dean Kilburg?
Aye.
Craig Maladra?
Aye.
Richard Marks?
Aye.
Jean McGowan?
Aye.
Jim Radecki?
Aye.
Robert Swanson?
Aye.
Item 11 passes unanimously. We jump down to Committee of the Whole items of business. Item 12A is to approve Resolution Number 2017-38, accepting a grant of property, the north side of Brisher Road, from the Todd L. Dempsey Declaration of Trust.
So moved.
Marks makes the motion,
Second.
seconded by Bruno. Any clarification needed on this matter? Jean, please take the roll.
Mike Bruno?
Aye.
Tara Burkhart?
Aye.
Donald Cummings?
Aye.
Becky Ruby? Aye. Dean Kilburg?
Aye.
Craig Maladra?
Aye.
Richard Marks?
Aye.
Jean McGowan?
Aye.
Jim Radecki?
Aye.
Robert Swanson?
Aye.
Motion passes with 9 affirmative votes, 1 nay vote, 0 absent. We do have a closed session matter, but at the risk of not surviving, I'm going to jump to new business. Is there any new business from any member of the audience before we adjourn to closed session? From the dais, Alderman Maladra, Alderman Bruno.
Yeah, just a quick announcement. This Saturday is the summer planting for beautification. Meet at the post office, 8 a.m. It looks like it's going to be a good day.
Alderman Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that most of us know the terrible events that transpired at Delnor Hospital this past Saturday. I wish to acknowledge the many organizations of first responders that played a role in resolving this awful situation. This includes TRICOM 911, Geneva Police, Geneva Fire, Tri-City Ambulance, Kane County Sheriff, SWAT, and state police, and our mutual aid partners. I'm proud to work with a number of them. We're sitting here, and many others on our commission, some of them might have been here. We are all committed to public service. Situations like these, though, ask more of our first responders than many of us would ever hope to be tested for. While our instinct is to flee danger, our first responders must rush toward that danger. I wish to acknowledge the professionalism and effectiveness of all those involved and the many other communities that sent medical resources to make up for Delnor being unavailable to residents for a good part of that Saturday. I particularly hope that these professionals and civilians that were traumatized by these events can receive the support they need to help preserve their psychological well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session on the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the public body. So moved. Motion by Marks. Second. Seconded by Swanson. Roll call vote, please.
Mike Bruno.
Aye.
Tara Burkhart. Donald Cummings.
Aye.
Becky Ruby. Dean Kilburg.
Aye.
Craig Maladra.
Aye.
Richard Marks.
Aye.
Jean McGowan.
Aye.
Jim Radecki.
Aye.
Robert Swanson.
Aye.
We are adjourning to closed session. There is no action being taken this evening. The cameras will be turned off and the microphones turned off as well. You're more than welcome to stay.